The Associated Press reported on Thursday, May 18, that several poor countries are facing economic instability or even collapse. They are struggling to repay billions of dollars in foreign loans, with a significant portion of these loans coming from the world's largest and most ruthless government lender, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Based on the analysis report, there are 4 key highlights. Excessive debt in poor countries. The Associated Press analysis on the countries with the highest debt owed to the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, and Laos, reveals that CCP debt is consuming an increasing amount of tax revenue. These tax revenues are essential for maintaining schools, providing electricity, and covering the costs of food and fuel. Moreover, CCP debt is depleting the foreign exchange reserves that these economies rely on to pay loan interest and avoid collapse. Some countries only have enough funds to sustain their economies for a few months. For instance, Mongolia has about 8 months, while Pakistan and Ethiopia have approximately 2 months. Previously, impoverished countries have experienced impacts such as foreign exchange shortages, high inflation, skyrocketing unemployment rates, and widespread hunger, but rarely to the extent seen last year. Zambia and Sri Lanka have already defaulted and are unable to pay the loan interest for subsidized ports, mines, and power plants. Behind the scenes, the CCP is unwilling to forgive the debt and keeps the actual amount of funds lent and the terms highly secretive, preventing other major lenders from intervening and providing assistance. Furthermore, investigators have discovered that borrowers are required to deposit cash into concealed escrow accounts, positioning CCP loans at the forefront of the creditor line to ensure priority in receiving payments. Experts predict that unless the CCP quickly softens its stance of not bearing significant loan losses, a wave of more defaults and political turmoil may occur. Ken Rogoff, an economist at Harvard University, stated, "In many parts of the world, the midnight bell, doomsday bell, is already ringing." Poverty and insurgency. For many highly indebted countries, the future may resemble what Sri Lanka experienced. Last year, rioters flooded the streets of Sri Lanka's capital, stormed the presidential palace, and forced the leader who had entered into heavy agreements with the CCP to flee the country. 500,000 industrial jobs disappeared, inflation soared to 50%, and over half of the population in many regions of the country fell into poverty. The anger and frustration caused by CCP debt are also evident in other countries. In Pakistan, millions of textile workers have been laid off due to excessive external debt, making it impossible to sustain power supply and keep the machinery running. Mohammed Tahir, who worked at a textile factory in Multan, Pakistan, 6 months ago, was laid off. He considered suicide because he could no longer bear watching his family of 4 go to bed without dinner night after night. "I have been facing the most severe poverty," said Tahir, who recently learned that Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves have been depleted, making it impossible to import raw materials for his factory. "I don't know when we will be able to resume work." In Kenya, the government has withheld the salaries of thousands of civil servants to conserve cash for paying off foreign loans. The president's chief economic advisor tweeted last month, "Salaries or default? Take your pick." Lack of transparency in CCP loans. Many of the loans provided by the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, to impoverished countries have recently come to light through the work of researchers, most notably Brad Parks, the executive director of aid data at the College of William and Mary. He discovered that billions of dollars in CCP loans never appeared on the books of recipient countries because they were not directly provided to governments but instead channeled through offshore shell companies. Some loans took the form of currency swaps. All of this indicates that the situation in many countries is much worse than previously known. In 2021, a decade after Parks and his team began tracking CCP debt, they gathered enough information to make a sensational discovery: at least $385 billion in hidden and unreported CCP debt across 88 countries. In Zambia, 2 Chinese banks provided a $1.5 billion loan to a shell company for the construction of a massive hydroelectric dam. However, this money never appeared on the country's books for years. In Indonesia, a $4 billion loan provided by the CCP for railway construction also never appeared in the government's public accounts. Years later, this changed as the budget overshot by $1.5 billion, leading the Indonesian government to provide 2 bailouts for the railway. Parks, who was commissioned by the World Bank to investigate CCP debt, stated, "When these projects go bad, something that was touted as private debt becomes public debt." He further added, "This is happening globally." Around the same time, Another aid data report indicated that many CCP loans flowed towards projects favored by influential politicians in recipient countries, often preceding crucial elections. Some of the constructed infrastructure lacked economic viability and posed numerous problems. In Sri Lanka, a Chinese-funded airport constructed in the hometown of the president, far from the majority of the country's population, saw minimal usage, with elephants roaming around the runway. As these countries approached the brink of collapse, especially with the comprehensive invasion of Ukraine by Russia starting on February 24 last year, the situation became even more precarious. Response from the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. The Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a statement provided to the Associated Press, expressed objections to the characterization of the CCP as an unforgiving lender and once again attributed the responsibility to the U.S. Federal Reserve. They also claimed to have extended loan terms and provided emergency loans, as well as forgiving 23 interest-free loans to African countries. However, Brad Parks noted that most of these loans were issued 20 years ago and account for less than 5% of the total amount borrowed by the CCP. The CCP further called for the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank to also forgive some loans. Unlike CCP banks, the IMF and World Bank have provided low-interest financing to assist distressed countries in recovering, so they generally do not receive special treatment.